Hi, Taurus Sun and Rising. Welcome to a video looking at the transits of Saturn into Pisces as well as Pluto into Aquarius. So these two longer ranging transits are adjacent to one another, and so they're kind of moving up in the chart, and both in March. But it's important to note that your individual chart is going to determine when this actually occurs. So even though I'm going to give dates for the transits, I'll just say that Saturn goes into Pisces on March 7th, and Pluto goes into Aquarius on the 23rd of March. But using myself as an example, I have Taurus rising. I'm a late degree Taurus rising, and my midheaven is about 4 degrees of Aquarius. So in 2023, I will not have Pluto in the 10th. It will remain in the ninth. And some of you, this may be the same thing. So I'm just doing this as a general reading, but you have to actually see your chart to know exactly if this is going to play out in the way I'm saying at the time I'm saying. But it's going to happen eventually, so it's not like you're listening to something that is never going to happen. So let's start with Saturn. Saturn is going into Pisces for the first time in almost 30 years, because Saturn has a transit of over 2.5 years for each sign. And so for some of you, you may be going through your first Saturn return if your natal Saturn is in Pisces. So you would be around the age of 30 if this is happening for you. Some of us, and I'm including myself, are having our second Saturn return in our late 50s. So that is an added thing going on for some people where they are having Saturn returns. I never hear about the third Saturn return, and I'm sure they exist if somebody's around the age of 90. So I don't know how many people are listening to me that are over that age, but congratulations if you've made it to your third Saturn return. But the point is that this adds a certain gravitas and maybe a reflection on one's life to have a Saturn return in addition to having Saturn in Pisces. Now, what is going to be happening is that Saturn has been in the sign of Aquarius for the past few years, and that has been the 10th house of career. Now, some people may have experienced this in a positive way. Maybe you finally got your act together when it came to career matters. It's very interesting because Saturn rules the 10th house. So it is, connected to that area of life. But I wouldn't be surprised if some people experienced um, some sort of obstacles with this placement because, transit, because Saturn is about cutting out the fluff, cutting out excess, getting down to brass tacks, and doing a lot of hard work. And for some people, if you experienced a situation where perhaps you didn't feel like your career had advanced, maybe it stalled out. It could have been during this time period, and Saturn was kicking your butt and asking you to really create something for yourself within your career that has longer range implications. And that is because then, if you work very hard, you'll be able to relax more because you set up an infrastructure that kind of works for itself. It takes care of itself. So an example is if somebody has a business and maybe that business isn't so hot, it doesn't seem to be expanding, and it just seems to be stalling. And they decide to do some kind of automated course where somebody can, where they don't have to actually do anything themselves once they have, set up the online course, and they can be earning money in their sleep. And maybe it will take off like a rocket, and it will produce even more than when they were physically involved with every transaction. So it's like you put in a lot of elbow grease on the front end, and then you are able to coast more because you have established that foundation. And even if you're somebody who is already established, there's always a new level to attain, right? So there might have been some kind of blockage. And now that Saturn has gone into the 11th house, perhaps you'll see it ease up and you will see your business or your career once again feel like it's flowing more. So I was always thinking that Saturn in the 10th house could just be very positive in terms of how it affected one's career. But now that I reflect upon it, I think that it might have actually challenged people to, work harder at what they're doing. Not to say that this is something that would be permanent, where they would have to always work twice as hard, but just because there was a need at that particular juncture in their life. Now that Saturn is in the 11th house, it's dealing with um, your hopes and wishes. That's kind of, in a way, vague because it's like, yeah, I wish I could do this. I wish I could do that. It's really, I read it described as long range goals, and I kind of like that, although I think a lot of people just automatically think of their career. And it's really more than that. It's about, where do you want to live? How do you want to live? Every aspect, your dream life, I guess I would boil it down to in a nutshell. And Saturn is about crystallization. It's about manifestation. It's not about these fantasies, these, longings, but it's about really bringing it down into the physical level. And how can I do this? How can I do something? How can I ground my dreams? And again, you may find that you have to alter your patterns, um, because and work harder in certain ways. In the 11th house, it's a house of gains, which has to do with the money that you earn through your work. So there may be some additional infrastructure that you have to apply that you can do this. Now, I was describing something about, creating a course. I was just using that as an example. But that's what we would call passive income. It's funny because, to call something passive income is a little bit um, misleading because it's not completely passive. You do have to work on the front end to do whatever it is that you're doing. And using the example that I gave, creating a course, I'm sure that takes a lot of time. I have never created a course, but you do have to do a lot on the front end, and then it's done. Once it's done forever, unless you expand upon it. So these kinds of things are, I think they're becoming more popular, where people are um, having things that digital products that people can purchase where they don't have to be directly um, connected to that. And this can be a time when your dreams are tested. So sometimes people have, these wild ideas of what they want to do, but the logistics are a little bit off. So you may find that you have a reality check where you are forced to admit that something that you want to happen is going to take either more work, or it's going to take you tweaking things because your expectations, your plans are not really realistic. And I know that a lot of times in the new age community they talk about dreaming big and all of that, and that's fine because it means that you're not playing small in life, you're not just accepting the bare minimum. But sometimes because people have stayed so long kind of like in that kind of bare minimum, they kind of jump. It's like one extreme to the other. And everything that you do has to have a kind of process. Everything that you're trying to make happen. In law of attraction, they say, it's like placing an order with the universe and then leaving it alone and going about your business. Well, some people have done that, and maybe things have not really happened for them. Maybe for some people that's all it takes, and that is like amazing. But if you have been trying to do things that way, or if you don't really resonate with that as even being a possibility, I would say that you can take the reins of the horse and take control back and not have to rely on the universe or whatever to do it, by simply breaking down your plan into easier to manifest steps. And that is one of the things that people tend to um, neglect when they find that it's not working. It's because they're so eager for it to happen that they want it to happen yesterday. It's understandable, it's human nature, but I feel like this is going to be a time when you have to keep those dreams alive, because Saturn can even test whether or not you feel that they're possible. And this is also a house of friendships and groups. Saturn can um, exert some kind of limits on this area of life. And how this can manifest is if you're at a turning point in your life, especially. So I would say, like, your first Saturn return is a perfect example of this, where you're in your late 20s and maybe you've been, you know, if you're, I don't know how many people, probably a lot by that point, at that point are still single, or they haven't settled down at least. You may be, I don't know, partying or doing something, doing things that are more, indicative of people that don't have a lot of commitments in their 20s. And you realize that it's not really cute anymore. I remember during my first Saturn return that was how I kind of saw it. Not that, it necessarily stopped right then and there, but I just became obvious of that this wasn't really uh, acceptable anymore. Some of the behaviors that you can get away with when you're in your early 20s, you start to see that, yeah, it doesn't look too good. So, one of the things that you're going to look at are the people around you. How are they influencing your life? And you may say, this isn't a good environment that I'm in. These aren't people that I really vibe with anymore. I'm going in a different direction. And that can be the time when you cut people out of your life. And you may do it yourself, but you may be doing it under the influence of the sober influence of Saturn, where you're kind of being more serious minded about the people in your life. And so, Taurus, just kind of giving you a heads up on that. But it's kind of like quality over quantity. So, you've had Jupiter in Aquarius. Maybe you have had a lot more of a social life in the past few years. I don't know. Like I said, I have had this placement too, and I'm like, well, actually, let me clarify. I was referring to Jupiter being in Aquarius for a year. So I said a few years, but that Saturn's transit is a few years. Jupiter is about 1 year or 13 months. And while Jupiter was in that house, maybe you had more of a social life. You met a lot more people. And that's the quantity. But now you might be whittling down, who is really somebody that I want to have in my life permanently. And also, if you are doing a lot of socializing, you may be more serious minded about things. And that brings me to Pluto, because Pluto is going into the 10th house. So that might be the reason why, because Pluto is about power. Pluto is about, you could say, because of power, control, obsession, deeper layers, approaching something from a deeper level. So Pluto has been in the 9th house, and transformation too. That's the big one I should have mentioned first, is transformation. But transformation can happen two ways. It can be your attitude towards a particular thing that is connected to that house, or you could have events happen that are connected to that house that transform your life. Now, that seems almost like the same thing, but what I mean by that is that they're not necessarily what you are seeking consciously. It's, things happening to you, or I would say for you. And the other one is just transforming your mindset about those things. And that would be, if you're doing this yourself, you're engaged in that process. So transform or be transformed, in other words. And so you've had Pluto in the 9th house for the last 15 years. Again, like I said, this is going to be different for different Taurus suns and rising people. And also remember that in addition to, the cusps being different degrees, or your sun being a different degree than another Taurus person, it's also the fact that the house, that some houses can be smaller than others, because a lot of astrologers use Placidus system, which is the unequal house system. So it's not just neatly, 30 degrees. So it's going to, starting at 0 degrees, or whatever, even if it's starting at 15 degrees, it's not going to be like that for everybody. So I just wanted to put that out there too. Um, but I'm just saying, just, using that example. For the last 15 years in the 9th house, and this is the house of the higher mind, and also the house of uh, God and the different philosophical structures, systems out there. that people adhere to. And when Pluto was in that house, there is a good chance that you have changed in the last 15 years your idea of God. And I know that I have. I wasn't even really paying attention to this transit because, the ninth house isn't something that I necessarily am always thinking about when I'm doing, interpretations and transits and all of that. But this is one that really I feel is played out for people in the sense that um, I have changed so much my views on religion. The ninth house can be organized religion in particular. And I kind of had this idea that I was like going to be so accepting of all these things, and I've changed. And it's really about penetrating deeper into that structure, what it really means, and not just liking or disliking something on the surface. And that's what Pluto asks of us, is to go deeper into that area. And also in terms of higher education, the same thing with me. There also the obsession. I went back to college in my 30s, and I even in this time frame I even went into graduate school, although again, I don't know. I would have to see because I don't know if it exactly dovetails for when this happened to me. But even if it doesn't, it did transform my belief system about higher education. I have a totally different feeling about it now. But back then, I was gung ho about it because I had a certain conditioning that, that was so important to me. So the same thing can apply to the 10th house. When Pluto is in your 10th house of career, I mean, let's say you're a Capricorn workaholic. You might have this placement and you are becoming less interested in working, 10 hours a day because you see at a deeper level what is really going on with your attitude towards career matters, and you're able to alter your behavior as a result. But what can happen for some people is that they become obsessed with success. This can happen at any point in your life. Some people are late bloomers where they're not really, that ambitious, and they start doing things at a later time than some of their peers, and then they just really step into their purpose or mission, and they feel that sense of resonance, and they can surprise a lot of people because this is the house of public reputation as well. But some people, it can go a different way. um, Maybe it's that they have always been ambitious and they feel like they have never quite made it, and now maybe they're in middle age, whatever that is. Maybe, I don't know what is what is considered middle age these days. Maybe in your mid 40s, whatever, and you're looking at your life and seeing that you're dissatisfied with how far you've gone, and then you double down when Pluto is in the 10th house. Is this a wise thing? Is this crazy? Is this destructive? It all depends on the intention. If the person has a false belief, then they're doing something, they're coming from a fear based reason, their ego, whatever. And that to me is not a good reason to go after something. Or I guess it's part of the ego, the midlife crisis, because the person is like, I only have so much time. But first of all, they're defining themselves by this outer thing, And also, they are not realizing that they are eternal beings. And they're just seeing it in terms of time, the linear time. So, all of these things can play with your head, it can be a motivating factor. And in some cases, it might be a good thing. Maybe you are finally feeling like you are resonating with what you're doing, and that gives you more power and motivation and energy so that you're able to um, do what you came here to do. Like if you feel like you stepped into your purpose. And I'm not saying that this transit of Pluto into the 10th is doing that for you per se. I mean, it might be actually Pluto in the ninth that gets the ball rolling because, like I said, the ninth house can be your belief systems, and Pluto here can empower them. And so, for some people, if they had been kind of um, with that conditioned mind and they were just going through the motions in life, this can be adopting a belief system that really works for you. And so I had been referencing the law of attraction. And yes, I mean, I think that that can certainly be an example of that, of being able to step into that sense of knowing that you have the power to change your thoughts. I think the late Wayne Dyer had a book called Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. And that certainly would be the ninth house transformation of thought. And, those manifestation coaches, that's the building block. One of the building blocks in that is changing your thoughts, transforming your thoughts. So now we're stepping into this career arena, this very public place at the top of the chart. How is that going to happen for you? One caveat, Taurus, be very careful about ethics at this time. Pluto is the lord of the underworld. So sometimes if a person gets this idea of they want success, fame can be the 10th house. They want fame. You don't want to sell your soul to get there. And Taurus is an earth sign. You rule the second house of earned income. So money, Pluto can be wealth. So do not be tempted by some kind of sketchy offers of wealth. And what you're doing is not right livelihood, as the Buddhists call it. Make sure that everything that you're doing, that you're offering others, is coming from a place of the highest integrity, and that you really are doing it for others and not just for yourself. Service to others versus service to self. And this can be a time when you do attain wealth in your career. By the way, Pluto is going to be here for 20 years. I just found that out. I assumed that all Pluto cycles were 15 years. No, this one is 5 more years than that. So it's going to go back into Capricorn this year, back into your fellow Earth sign, because it's, it has a very slow moving, it's a very slow moving transit. So it's going to stay at 0 degrees and then go back into Capricorn. I think it ends 2023, still at a late degree of Capricorn. So you're not done with the ninth house, which is great because it's dipping its toe into the 10th and then going back into the ninth. And like I said, for some of you, this is going to stay in the ninth the whole time, even when it goes into Aquarius. And but this is a perfect example of, even though, like I said, it's not going to be true for everyone that's going into the 10th house. For those of us who have it staying in the ninth all during 2023, get your mindset together. Get your transformational uh, mindset, get your mind like, or philosophy, life philosophy, so on point that when it actually goes into your 10th house, you're like good to go because you are coming from the highest vibration that you can. And you're not allowing yourself to doubt yourself, and that will maximize the impact that Pluto has when it's in your 10th house. So, and actually, since it is going to have a 20-year transit, I am curious how far in 2024 it's actually going to get. Like, is it even going to get past 1 degree? Because, you know, Pluto retrogrades for 5 months every year. So that's one of the reasons why it is so slow moving. But given the fact that this is 20 years instead of 15, I can just imagine how long it's going to take to get into that 10th house. For some of us who may even have Aquarius at an early degree in, I mean, have a midheaven at an early degree of Aquarius. It might take, a couple of years or even longer for Pluto to even go there. So get your mentality, the higher mind, I should say, as purified and as powerful, empowered as possible. Sometimes Pluto in the 10th can be fall from grace, and that happens when a person is, tempted to do something that they shouldn't do, that is not uh, ethical, so that they can leapfrog over certain, steps and get and cut to the chase. No, you can't do that, because that can be doing something that is not in alignment with the truth. It's like I had the offer a few years ago to purchase subscribers and views and that kind of thing, and I wrote the person, I said, but that's not honest. Why would I do that? Maybe it's because my sun is in Sagittarius, and that rules the 9th house, and it deals with ethics and these kinds of things, these kind of philosophical issues and challenges and temptations. you know these kinds of things are real in life. There's a lot of manipulation out there, and things that you look at that you're comparing yourself to could be quite an illusion in some cases. So some people, I mean, they're willing to do whatever it takes to get ahead. And Taurus, you have to really be as ethical as possible and keep, completely clean when it comes to your behaviors as it pertains to your career. Even though you may be more, wanting that success, nothing that comes through cheating or the other type of dishonest behavior is something you can really feel good about anyway. So just remember that. But there's that also that possibility of one's reputation being sullied if they are not on the up and up. Okay, so that's what I have for you. I hope that this uh, gives you things to look forward to, because I think this is going to be a very powerful time for um, Sun and rising sign Taurus people in the coming years. If you would like a personal reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.